Okay, let's jump right in. This video is a continuation of my journey into coloring, and what you're going to see is how I approach practicing with colors while incorporating some shading techniques. Now, as you can see from my reference photo, I have some good shadows to experiment with. Now, I want to mention that I'm going to learn a valuable technique toward the end of this video when using my Copic markers, so stay tuned for that. Back to the sketch. What you're seeing me do is that I am starting with a pencil sketch. This is just going to help me place the detail a little bit better and not have to worry about spending so much time trying to be accurate with my fountain pen. Something I do on most of my pencil sketches, and you can notice it right here, is that I'm gripping the pencil all the way back, and this just promotes a loose sketch. It also helps me achieve lighter lines. Now, as you can see, I am using a mechanical pencil, and that's just my preference, but the trick with a mechanical pencil is to avoid getting those hard lines, which can be easy to do, and that is why I'm using such a loose grip. Now that I've switched over to my fountain pen, I'm going to start to use my pencil lines as a guide as I ink in clean lines. Now, this is the point of the sketch that I'm going to be making all of the decisions. I'm going to be deciding where my line work goes based off the pencil sketch. There are no erasing my inked lines once they're on the paper. At this stage, it is very important to embrace your imperfections. When you're working with a pen, correcting a mistake may make it worse, so lean into your mistakes and be okay with those imperfections. But most of all, learn to be confident with your strokes. And don't get upset when you do make a mistake, because that is part of your development process. That is how we all learn. At the end of the day, these are meant to be sketches, so it's okay if they have a little bit of imperfections. Now, I want to take a minute to talk about the sketchbook that I'm using. I will be coloring the scene with some alcohol markers, so I know that my markers tend to bleed, so I'm going to be working with a sketchbook that will hold up. This is a mixed media sketchbook. It's designed for wet and dry mediums, and I like this sketchbook because even though the markers will bleed a little bit onto the back side of the page, it is not going to bleed through onto the next page. Yes, that does render the back page unusable, but I'm okay with that. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about the drawing utensils I use, and it's important to know your pens and pencils, and the more you draw with those utensils, the more you learn from them. For example, I can vary the thickness of a line from my fountain pen. In fact, you'll see me do this later on, and I'll make sure to point it out. Additionally, a fountain pen ink tends to flow really smooth, meaning that I don't need a lot of pressure to get that ink onto the paper. This makes it an ideal tool for very light and loose sketches, since it can work well even with a very loose grip. The other thing worth mentioning about a fountain pen is that the direction you draw in will make a difference because of the nature of the pen's tip. The ink tends to flow better when you drag the pen versus pushing the pen. Additionally, when you push the pen, it has the potential of causing more friction, which leads to a rougher line. Okay, back to my drawing. You will notice that I am drawing in some of my shadows. That is to say that I am drawing the outline of where I want that shadow color to go. I'm only doing that with some of my shadows. For example, I'm not going to be drawing in the shadows on the front of my building. The reason for this is because those shadows are a lot softer, and I don't want to add any hard lines to take away from that softness. I also want to mention that I have not attempted soft shadows before, so what you're going to see me do is approach this concept on the fly. This is how I learn. I like to dive in and test new techniques in my drawings, and I'll make sure to explain what's going on through my head when I do this. Okay, As you can see, I'm adding colors to my scene, and one of the things that I've been working on is trying to manipulate colors to be closer to the colors that I'm seeing in my reference photo. And the way that I'm doing that is that I start with a base color, one that I think represents the closest color to what I want to achieve. And then I will look at the colors in my reference photo and the colors on my sketch and determine which colors are lacking in my sketch. For example, in the green awning in my photo, it has a little bit more blue than in my sketch, so I need to find a way to introduce more blue. You'll see me do that using a blue marker. And I'm going to continue adding more colors using that same technique. Now, at some point, I realized that I missed drawing the grate in front of my window, so I am going to go back and do that. And this is where I'm going to add that thicker line. I'm familiar enough with this pen to know that if I put a little bit of extra pressure on it, I can get a nice thick line out of it. Okay, now you may have noticed that I've started coloring the windows, and I wanted to try to get this window as close to the shade that's in my reference photo. And similar to the awning, I'm going to be layering a lot of colors. Now, after all that is said and done, I probably could have pushed the windows a little more toward a tan color, but this was a good exercise to help me learn how to push those colors. And once I'm done, I'm going to jump in with my colorless blender. Now, I want to take a minute to talk about the colorless blender, because I'm going to be using this uncommon marker quite a bit in my scene. The first thing you might notice is that I'm using it to push color away on my door. And you'll see me test the spot with my finger. I'm just checking to see how saturated that spot was because I've been putting a lot of alcohol down using that marker. The result is I was able to push that black color off the page and get that lighter silver handle to show. I'll use this same technique with the marker to add a highlight to my awning. Okay, so now I'm about ready to experiment with the shadows on the front of my building, but in order for me to get a softer shadow, my thought process is that if I can saturate my entire page with alcohol using that colorless blender, I can then follow it up with my shadow color, which should hopefully bleed a little more than normal, giving me a softer edge. Now, with my shadow color, I'll be using the brush tip since it also helps promote a softer edge and loosely color in the shapes that I'm seeing. Again, I'm trying a number of techniques to promote a soft edge. I'll take this opportunity to wrap up the rest of my shadows in my scene. And you'll notice that I will layer in the shadows in some of my areas, like the corners of the buildings, just to get a deeper shade. Now, for the shadow on the lower left side of the building, I'm just going to be using some quick, rough lines, again, to promote a softer appearance. Now, once I'm done with the shadows, I notice that the shadow edges on the front of the building still appear too hard, and I'm going to attempt to soften them up even more. I'm going to go back with my colorless blender and just color over the shadows, introducing more alcohol to that area, hopefully causing it to bleed even more into the surrounding colors. And here's the before and after of this technique. You can see that it really did help make those edges softer. Okay, lastly, I'm going to finish up my scene by using some of my darkest shadow colors to enhance the contrast in specific areas of my scene like the doorway and the windows. And that's it. That's my final scene. I had a lot of fun experimenting with different markers and different techniques. If you have any tips or techniques that you would like to share, please leave those in the comments below. And if you haven't already, please give this video a like and subscribe.